How long have you been married?
5 years.
5 years?
I had to think about that. How sad. 5 years.
How did you and your husband meet?
We met in high school, actually.
Where was that?
He went to Braille Linda High, and I was in Big Bear, and we met at a football game. We just kind of stayed in touch. And he went into the Army, and I made some other decisions, and came back together about 6 years ago.
So he's been in the Army in some capacity for how long?
15 years. Only 15 more. He was deployed 2010 through 2011. He was gone about 18 months.
As the spouse of someone who's deployed, what is that like? I think a lot of us just don't know, have a clue if we aren't in that situation ourselves.
You know, it's scary and lonely, and there's so much pride at the same time. It's this constant roller coaster of emotions, because you go through the days you're terrified that something's going to happen, and then there's that pride though of that person that's serving, and there's the stress. I work full time, and our daughter was in school, and we actually bought our home while he was deployed. So it's just this constant revolving roller coaster of everything.
So you were working full time, you had your daughter.
Yes, Girl Scouts. I was the co-leader of her Girl Scout troop.
And he was deployed in Iraq, is that
Correct.
And he spent how much time there in total?
Almost 18 months.
Okay. Was there somebody here who was helping you and giving you support?
My mother-in-law is here, so she's gone through his entire career with him, Army career with him as well. So she was a great wealth of information, and I volunteer with military widows, and there's that sense of source of support with military spouse to military spouse. So I got really lucky that I had them, because I think I probably would have gone crazy without them.
So you were already volunteering with that group?
Correct. I've been with the Got Your Back Network since 2009, since the inception of the organization.
Okay. And how did that particular group, or those widows, how did they help you deal with your husband being gone?
You know, nobody understands what it's like to go through things unless you have. You know, I'll never pretend to understand what they deal with every day, having their spouses not come home, but they understood what it was like to be deployed, to be raising your child without, that best friend. So when there's that frustration, they were always the ones that were kind of there with that cheerful, we've got you type of an attitude, which is something that unfortunately a lot of my civilian friends didn't understand. Because it's hard to imagine what it's like to have your husband gone that long, or your wife, if the longest that you've been apart is 2 days in Missouri.
Were you able to talk to your civilian friends about what you were going through?
I did. I mean, I have some amazing friends. There just was that different level of understanding. They were there as much as they could be, but there's that stopping point when you can't go any farther.
And what was the most stressful thing for you about your husband being gone?
Doing, it was making the decisions for our daughter, and helping her understand why Daddy had to be gone. Because we lived in Irvine at the time, and unfortunately there's not a huge military presence in the schools. So she didn't have anyone that she could identify with. So I think that for me at least, the hardest part was getting her to understand that Daddy was going to be okay, and Daddy was coming home, when you can't make that promise, and not having him there to lean on when she wanted to have a temper tantrum. She was 5. Mm-hmm. So she would get frustrated and mad, and at 5 they can't articulate their feelings. So it was kind of, you're watching your child struggle through something that you can't explain. I think for me that was harder than the uncertainty of him being there, because I could understand it.
So did you call the women you knew from the widows group and late at night and talk? I mean, how did you get help from them?
You know what? It was Facebook is great, or emails, and somehow you just kind of know. I'm not a late at night caller. Even if I'm frustrated, I would usually call my mother-in-law, because she's up all hours of the night also. But the women would I do so many events with them that we would see each other on a regular basis, and they would just kind of, they'd just randomly call, or you just call to talk about kids, and it turns into, really the call was more because I just needed someone to calm me down, or because we could just talk, and it didn't always have to be talking about deployment. You can talk about other things that aren't so focused, and it takes your mind off of it. So they were just there. They were, you know, I think sometimes I feel like I get more from them sometimes than they get from me.
When your husband got back from his deployment, how were things then? Was he dealing with some issues with, you know, being back in civilian life that you had to?
You always deal with difference. I mean, when he left, our daughter was 5. When he came home, she was 7.5. So you've missed so much time where you know, I'm used to doing everything. She knew how to make her own lunch, and she'd get herself ready for school. So it was things like that for us, I think, that were a little bit harder. We were able to talk a lot more while he was deployed than a lot of people do. So we were allowed to have that communication. So I don't think that part of it was as difficult. I think with every deployment you deal with things, whatever happened there, you know, of course he had to deal with when he came home. We didn't have any major issues that unfortunately so many people face. Ours was more of just getting the 7-year-old to understand that daddy can make her lunch now, she doesn't have to, and daddy to understand he doesn't need to make her lunch because she knows how to do it. Those were our bigger issues. And then, like I said, we bought the house while he was gone. So it was getting used to being home and everything being different than when he left.
Yeah. Where were you? You were living in Irvine, you said before? Were you renting? Or?
Yeah, we rented an apartment down there while he was gone because she was in school there. And we loved the community sense of Orange and bought our house here.
And he's a reservist, so is he gone some weekends too and that kind of thing?
1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year.
And do you ever worry he's going to get deployed again? Or?
Oh, of course. That could happen at any time. I think it's always in the back of your mind. But until I have a date, I don't think too much about it because that would run our lives. I can't live my life waiting for that either. So there's always that fear, and hopefully, you know, it doesn't happen. But if it does, we've done it before, and we'll do it again.
So you kind of know how to deal with it.
Yeah, to an extent. I think, you know, next time she'll be older, so you're dealing with a whole different level of kid stuff. But I think having done it, there's that level of comfort in knowing that you can do it, and, you know, I can handle the household stuff, and, you know, if things break, I know who to call, and she knows that she can rely on me. And then there's that comfort, I think, for both of us that daddy came home once, that he'll come home again.
Well, what do people who don't have members of their family who are in the military and don't have someone that they've lost, you know, during combat, what is it that people like that, and I would include myself, that we need to know about the families who are going through that?
That there's a lot of families. We've lost almost 7,000 people in this war, and the estimate is about half of them had left behind a wife or kids. So I think the biggest thing is to know that there are a lot of families out there that have paid that sacrifice, that have had to deal with losing their husband, their wife, mother, father, that, you know, they're grieving this loss, but at the same point, the pride that they feel in that loved one is unbelievable. These families inspire me on a daily basis because they've been able to take those steps and grow from these situations, and moms are raising, you know, 4 and 5 children on their own and doing a great job. And I think the biggest thing is that as a community, we need to support our families still. That once their spouse is killed, we still need to stand behind them, and we need to be that community that wraps their arms around them, and if they need something, to be there for them. If their children need something that we can help, then we need to do that. And I think that's as a community and as a country. The military's biggest thing is, you know, never leave one behind. And we can't do that with the families either. And we can't leave them behind when they need us most. There are so many organizations that are there that help families. You have the Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors, TAPS, the Got Your Back Network that I'm very involved with, the American Widows Project, that all offer, you know, they need volunteers for events, they need donations. You know, mostly they're all nonprofits, and in this economy, money is hard to come by. But they hold financial literacy programs and events and grief support and counseling, and really look up the organizations that are in your area and help out and volunteer your time to do something, even if you think it's small. To them, it's not. We do big games with the Angels every year. The Angels have been a great supporter. We take kids out to a ball game, which is something so simple, but it's such a big deal for them. We just worked with the Laguna Beach Playhouse and took a group of girls to see Pinkalicious, which is a stage show for kids, the girls had a great time, and it was something so small that maybe for the rest of us, a $20 ticket, isn't that much money. And to some of these families, that's a lot of money because they're living on fixed income because they no longer have, that husband that's home to have the dual income. So little things like that you can help out.
Do you think most people have just forgotten that, we're still fighting, that we still have troops in combat, and we still have people who have lost loved ones, or is it just something we don't want to deal with? We know, but we're not dealing with it.
I think it's a bit of both. I think that the war has gone on so long that sometimes it's hard to remember that we're still there, and the media coverage isn't what it used to be. But on the same time, it's hard to deal with. It's a financial thing that everyone looks at how much we've spent on this war, and at the same point, unfortunately, we did it for whatever reason, and whether people agree with it or not, the family supporting our military, it does seem to have changed a lot in the last several years. And I hope that that changes again and people go back to remembering that we do have a huge contingency of our military there, and we have so many families here that are waiting for a loved one to come home or have lost one. And I'd like to think that people don't forget, but we have been going through this for 11 years.
You said that, serving these families is an honor for you and a privilege. Can you talk a little bit more about that, like what you mean by that and why that is so?
I'm not one of them, and in the sense that I'm not a Gold Star wife. I'm honored that they'll let me into their world, that I have become great friends with them, and I feel like it's such a privilege to be able to give my time to them, because I can't tell them I understand. I can't hug a widow and tell her I understand how she feels, because the truth is I don't. I can imagine, which would be, I couldn't imagine the pain that they must feel losing that person. So being able to have events with them and get to know them and their children, and have them open their arms and their homes to me has been very humbling, and it's very honoring. And I was just in Virginia a few months ago with a widow and her children, and I stay with her. This is the second year I've gone back and spent a weekend with her family. And they took me to Arlington last year to meet their father. And to me, it's such an honor to be allowed to get to know them, because I can imagine I'm a very private person in a lot of ways, and that would be a part of my life I think would be very hard to open up to somebody. And they've never had a problem with it. I go to Vegas for our big Miss America event for Project Gratitude every year, and day one I've got kids crawling all over me and we're laughing and joking. And to me, that's just, I can't even explain the feeling of just being able to sit there and get to know their husbands and know about their husbands in ways that a lot of times your girlfriends don't sit and talk about how amazing their husbands were all the time. Usually we're complaining about how they didn't put their shoes away. Whereas with these women, I hear all the great things about their husbands, including the fact they didn't put their shoes away. So it is very honoring, and it's to be able to spend as much time with them and plan events for them is definitely a privilege for me.
How did you meet this widow that you talked about?
We met at Project Gratitude last year in Las Vegas. Project Gratitude is a big event we do every year with, we take 10 military widows and their daughters to a week in Las Vegas for Miss America. And they were at our event in 2010, I guess it was. And we just clicked, and her birthday's in September, and I told her I'd come out and we'd go out for her birthday, and she didn't think I would, and next thing you knew, I had a flight booked, and I stayed at her home in Virginia, and she took me around DC, and we've gotten to be very good friends. I talk to her just about every morning. And it's great, and my daughter does a lot of the stuff with me. So she gets to know the kids, and which sometimes helps because kids have an unspoken way of doing things where they kind of know what's going on, but they don't talk about it. And it gives, the mom, the kids can go play for a few hours, and I can sit with moms and talk to them about what they need. And it's been a great thing, and it's really, I think, opened her up, but I've learned so much about these women and given me a chance to get, really close to a lot of them, doing the birthday, the kid parties and Christmas parties and everything else.
What do they typically tell you that they need?
Most of all, a lot of times it's financial assistance because, like I said, you do lose that additional income. So most of what we get is requests for financial assistance and educational money to further their education.
Their education and
Their education
kids as well?
Yeah, a lot of them, their children are still very young. You know, most of our service members that are being killed, unfortunately, it seems in their 20s. So their wives are about the same age. So their kids are mostly pretty young. So it's the wives wanting to continue their education and further it. We have widows who are working on their second master's degrees, and then we have some that are just starting their bachelor's. So we get a lot of requests for financial assistance for that.
Do you think it's hard for them to ask for that? Or?
I think it is. I think it's a very humbling feeling to have to ask for help, especially when you've gotten to that point where you're trying to be, not only independent necessarily, but you have to take care of your children and everything else. I think going and asking for help from anybody is very humbling.
So now, have you traveled all around the country to meet with people, or mainly you work from, home? And
I have been here. I do a lot of stuff here. I've been to Virginia, met with several of our widows back east. We have actually Gold Stars Wives has an Arlington chapter that I've met with most of the widows there. But as an organization, we're nationwide. So we have people in Florida. I'll be in Texas in a few months because we're planning a retreat in Texas as well.
And when you say we, you're talking about?
As an organization as a whole.
Got Your Back Network?
Correct, the Got Your Back Network.
Tell us a little bit about what that organization is.
The Got Your Back Network was formed in 2009 by a Navy lieutenant commander who lost some friends in Afghanistan. And it was formed to take care of and assist widows and their children, or widowers and their children. We plan events, kind of the fun day things, and like I said, the Angels Games, Miss America. We also have financial literacy program to help teach the surviving spouses about money and how to budget properly. We're working on a program to get them back in the workforce, and it's very similar to a Dress for Success type of a thing, helping them with resumes and everything else. In addition, we do a lot of networking, because like I said, the only people who know who they're going through are other families who are experiencing the same thing. So we do a lot of events just to put them together so they get to know each other. We also work with a lot of widows from suicide. So they're in a whole, they have their own unique challenges.
These are service
members who have unfortunately and committed suicide. So we have a lot of the widows from that as well, that we get together and help kind of connect to lean on each other for support, because they really do need that. Technically, I'm the board secretary. I'm also the family and volunteer coordinator and the West Coast events planner.
Okay, which means what?
Which means anything that happens in California for Got Your Back, I plan and work on most of the execution. So I know pretty much every family that we have, I've spoken to on the phone at least once. We meet on a regular basis with several of our spouses in San Diego. We're doing our Christmas party coming up, and I'm planning that one. All the Angels games, Padres games we did over the summer. So I pretty much, to a large degree, kind of run the West Coast operations for Got Your Back. On a regular basis, we work with about 250 out of the, I think I read somewhere, about 4,500 families we have nationwide.
Okay. And that's mainly, like you said, helping connect them with other
families and resources, and just kind of giving them that person they can call, that one number that says, okay, look, I need this or this, and they know they can come to me. The first thing I do when I meet a new family is call them, because we have a lot of them come through the website. I call them on the phone, give them my phone number, my email, and then follow up with their children's information for events we may have, birthday cards, or just resources in general.
And when do you find time to do this? If you're working full-time, right? You've got your daughter, she's busy with soccer and other activities.
My husband asked me the same question. You know what? When you love something and you're passionate about it, you just find time. Whether that's my lunch hour, phone calls to and from work. It is an hour drive to work at home. So most of my East Coast families I'll talk to in the morning, because I leave for work at 5:30. So I can call them on the way from work. I call them on the way home. I do it on my lunch hour. I sit on the couch and with my laptop. I find time for it.
Do you spend a lot of time late at night too, kind of doing some
Yeah,
stuff?
I stay up pretty late most nights trying to make sure that I don't drop the ball on anything. And now, you know, adding the pageant aspect to it just adds one more thing. But
right. Now, how did you get involved with that, with pageantry?
I started competing when I was 9. My mother was a pageant competitor back when she was younger, and like every little girl, you want to be like mom. So I started competing and competed on and off through high school. And it was just a fun thing that her and I did together. And then I stopped competing and got married. And when we got married, I found this pageant system, the international system, and their biggest thing is platform and passion and having something in the community that, you know, matters to you and that you're working towards. So I competed and didn't win in 2009, and came back this year and was asked by a couple of widows to do it for them. And
they asked you to do it?
We had a conversation about bucket lists. And I said one of mine was I always wanted to win a state title and represent our state at a national pageant, knowing that having a title, people tend to pay attention a little bit more than just Shana calling. So I figured I could do something to help bring kind of more awareness to the organization and to families. And so I had told them at this, we got together for a kind of, I don't want to say memorial, it was a celebration several years after she celebrates the death of her husband, not celebrates, but remembers her husband. And we were kind of all talking about it. And one of the ladies mentioned that she'd always wanted to compete in a pageant. And I said, oh, that's funny. That's on my bucket list. And she says, oh, well, you should do it. It's not right now. This is not a good time. No, do it for me. And it kind of turned into, well, you know, we can't. And I said, you know, if I do it and I win, it's for you guys. I'll dedicate my entire year to military families, to families of the fallen, and whatever I can possibly do in addition to anything else to help them. And the day of the pageant, I called a good friend of mine who's a military widow, and we were laughing and joking about interviews and how I felt about interview and, you know, what dress I should wear, and she was really there. And at the end of the night, and I won, and I sent her a picture, and the response I got back was, holy cow. That's kind of summed up how I felt about it. So that's where my year is going to be, is anything I can possibly do in addition to anything else I'm doing for them, and raising the awareness as a military family. And, you know, every time my husband deploys, you know, I could very well, you know, be in their shoes. It's the reality that we face as a military family. So how could, you know, and as a military wife, they're military wives, we kind of stick together. And how could I turn my back on, you know, the women who have gone before me? I have met some of the most amazing people on this journey. I met a gentleman several years ago whose father was in Vietnam and was killed in Vietnam, and his mother raised 5 boys all by herself. And, you know, it was very different back then, and what she faced dealing with that is very different than what a lot of our widows face now, just based on the war and the time of year, you know, where we're at. But meeting him and seeing what his mom struggled through, and then meeting our families and see what they struggle through, I couldn't imagine not having them and not being that part of their lives and being able to help them, because, you know, someone has to do it.
Now, are you already in your reign, I guess, for lack of a better word, as Mrs.
Yes.
When did that start?
I won my title September 8th, and I will compete for Mrs. International in July as Mrs. California.
Okay.
And hopefully I win there.
What does that mean to be Mrs. California International?
It means a lot more work. No, you know what? It's appearances and speaking at schools and speaking to public groups, Rotaries, Kiwanis, and basically, you know, my biggest thing is to educate our public about our families and the things that they need. The parades are fun. I mean, what girl doesn't want to dress up in a pretty dress and wave in a nice car? But the biggest thing this year is for me is to use the title as a platform to speak to as many people as I can. And if that means shouting from rooftops, I will. But that's my biggest duty, is just to continue to work my platform and raise awareness for the families of the fallen. It's been pretty much every weekend. Saturday mornings are non-touchable. It's soccer morning. But other than that, it's pretty much every single weekend since I won my title.
So you've got some kind of engagement?
Yeah. and then during the week, I've done a few speaking engagements, but I try to limit it to the weekends just because it's, with work. But like I said, Saturday mornings are the only untouchable day of the week. Got Your Back Network is kind of really such a large part of my life, that being able to set up a booth and do that and be able to talk to people and get to know people has been great. And the title has really brought a lot more opportunities to do that.
Does your daughter go on the parades with you and wave from the car?
She does usually. This last one she didn't. My daughter and my husband went to the Northwoods Memorial in Irvine instead of coming with me to Marietta to the honor field. But certain things are hard with her because in Marietta they have the Field of Honor, which is an amazing, they set up, and hundreds and probably thousands of flags. It's unbelievable. They also have their Field of Honor. And I lost a very good friend in 2007 in Iraq, and his name was on one of the flags. And I kind of, unfortunately lost it a little bit. And a little hard to do with my daughter there. Because right now she sees the military and unfortunately the loss of a service member as such something full of pride that I think seeing mommy cry might change that a little bit. But she sees all these kids have so much pride in their father, and these women who have so much pride in their husbands, and we have so much pride in my husband that I don't think she's ever seen me cry over someone being dead. The loss of a service member has never been a sad thing for her, because I try to shelter her from that. I mean, when he was gone, she saw me cry, heavens knows, more than enough times, because I think it's healthy that she saw that. But when it comes to that kind of being so close, it works a little better. But yet she went to Northwood Memorial and read a list of names of service members that are now on their walls. And she was very proud of herself for that. And she still has the list in her bedroom, which she just thinks that was such a thing to do with honor, because people weren't crying. There was nothing sad about it. It was just immense honor for her to stand there and, read Sergeant whomever's name. So it's a little, I'm very cautious what I let her come to for that reason.
Does she have the wave down?
She waves like a kid. It's awesome. She's like this the whole time.
How do you wave?
I'm such a mom, so I'm like the little kids. It's like it gets kind of boring to stand there like.
You don't do this. Then.
No, there's no elbow, wrist with me.
What was that event you said your daughter read the names?
The Northwoods honor, was it Northwoods Gratitude and Memorial and Gratitude Wall in Irvine. It's on the corner of Bryan and Culver? No, Bryan and Yale. It's such a beautiful memorial that we go for we've gone there for every holiday and read names. Unfortunately, there's been that many holidays to read names at, but when you start going through names and you know them, it becomes a little different. Especially knowing so many of the widows. I'll walk down the wall and I know so many of the names that it gets some of those times. My daughter and I took roses there for Memorial Day last year, and she wanted to take a rose for every daddy that she knew. We would have been there all day. Unfortunately, we just did the color run in San Diego. It's a 5K. And I'm like, well, you're going to go to Grammy's. Mommy's going to go do this run with Miss Jennifer and Miss Megan, who are both widows that I know. And she says, no, Mommy, I want to run. And I'm like, it's 3.2 miles. Like, you're 8. And she goes, I'm going to run for the daddies that didn't come home. That child ran every mile of that, which I was impressed. I will give her that. She ran every mile. At the end of it, she looked at me and she said, she says, when are we doing it again? And I'm like, oh, let's see how you feel tomorrow. It's a long run. And so we're signed up we're going to do the color run in Irvine. So we've signed up for quite a few 5Ks that we're going to do together, because that's her way of saying thank you to the daddies that didn't come home. And for me, it's a great way to honor our fallen, and I also use it as a fundraiser for Got Your Back. So we can kind of go both ways and, get sponsors for events coming up. We're doing a toy drive for the Christmas party that we're having in a few weeks. So it's a good way to, and it's always a good conversation starter at an event when you have a picture on your back, because then they want to know who it is and who you're running for and why you're doing it. And it's a really great way to, further educate people that, Mike Griffin was a human being, not just a picture. And I think it's so important to do that.
Do you find that most people are aware of Got Your Back Network? Do they know what it is? Because I'll admit, I didn't know.
No, we're a smaller organization. I think that we're growing very slowly because we keep our events very small. We don't do big 350 person events. We like the fact that our events are 20 to 25 people because it gives everyone a chance to get to know each other. So I think we're growing very slowly. The last year, I think I've seen the most growth. I think we added about 75 families over the last year. So I think that's been the largest growth that we've done, and most of it's by word of mouth. When we did the Memorial Day, one of our families threw out the first pitch at the Angels-Yankees game, and so they put it up on the Jumbotron, which was very neat, to see the organization and to see this family. And we got quite a few things out of that, but for the most part, it's word of mouth, which it can be good and bad. I would hate to grow too fast and not have the money to really be able to support the families. I'd rather grow slow and always know that as we're growing, so is the financial means of the organization. Mm-hmm. I always get to the parade. The Mary Day parade, I got there about an hour and 45 minutes early so that I could walk around and talk to people. I met these great World War II veterans, these two gentlemen who had so many great memory. Their memory was still, they were 87 and 93, but their memory was amazing, talking about going to the war and coming home and just what that experience was like for them. And I got to meet a lot of military families. So I like to show up early, and I usually leave late because I like to talk to people. And I think that it's important as a title holder and a human being, but to walk around in a crown and a sash is great. But if you can't get down and talk to people and get to know people and really interact, you're kind of wasting your experience. And I like kids, and I'd love to have 25, but I don't know if my husband would go for that. I like kids, and I like to play with them, and I like to be able to talk to their moms, and just to be able to really educate people and to be part of a community, which is something that pageantry has really given me the opportunity to do.